Hey guys, it's Katie, and I'm here today to talk about whether I think booktubers are too critical of the things they read. Honestly, this is a video that's been kind of a long time coming because of some things that I've seen going on in the community, whether it's on Booktube itself or on Book Twitter or in some ways on Goodreads. It's just something that seems to be so pervasive no matter where you go. And I figured it was time to have a little chat about it. So let's start at the beginning. As we go through school and through our education all across the board, we're taught to read critically and read analytically. We literally will read a book and then we will pick apart every aspect of that book, from the color of the walls in a room to what this character actually meant when they said something. And frankly, it's really irritating that we're taught to do that because we don't necessarily know what the author's intent was when they wrote it in the first place. I actually remember seeing like an article or something a while back that was like, oh, you can tell by the blue of this room and the blue of the furniture that the author was expressing their depressive period in this scene. When in reality we found like a primary source document, like a journal or something, about their writing process. They're like, I literally just liked the color blue, so I wanted to make this room blue. And so, I mean, just the ridiculousness of analyzing and critically tearing apart absolutely everything that we read is so frustrating. And honestly, I've just seen it more and more on Booktube, but I've also seen it in a more heightened state. It's incredibly frustrating to me when I see a comment on Goodreads or on Twitter about a book that someone's reading. They're like, I loved every aspect of it except for this one sentence. Therefore, I'm giving this book 2 stars. And I'm like, where did that even come from? I mean, you enjoyed the entire book except for like that one tiny little sentence or that one scene or whatever, and it goes down to 2 stars from a 5-star read. That just completely boggles my mind. And I was actually talking to someone the other day about this, and their take on it was like, okay, well, in some circumstances I can understand that being a thing, and I completely agree. Like, for instance, let's say you were going into a book and you were not warned of a potentially triggering topic, and then you were severely triggered by it. Like, that I can totally understand. But when it's just, when you go in and, you've heard somebody talk about it, beyond all reason, whatever, everything is out in the open, and yet they didn't talk about this one line or this one scene because it might not have been important to someone. But then, like, it's just we become so hypercritical of everything. And I mean, it's not just pervasive in the book community, it's kind of all over. And it's just really frustrating for me because if this thing is in here, I am personally attacked and they are automatically wrong. I'm not going to continue reading the story because A, B, and C, like, they're wrong. They are homophobic or fatphobic or whatever, just because of this one tiny little thing that is in the book. I mean, if it was what the whole book was about, and if you read the book in its entirety, I would totally understand where someone was coming from. Like, if it was so pervasive and so core to the book that it was, just in there as you go, like, it was just, you couldn't distance it from the actual story, totally understandable. But if it was just that the author somehow just managed not to think about this one word that they were using when they were writing it, and then, it just was there kind of as a descriptor or something, and it offends someone to the point where they're like, no, like, hard no. I take a little bit of issue with that because authors don't necessarily think about that, and they should not be required to think about every single word that they put on the page before it gets published. I mean, yes, there are things as sensitivity readers and editors, and they could maybe point something out and the author could change it. But the thing is not everyone is going to catch everything, and one word or one sentence should not determine our thoughts and feelings on a book. And in some ways, neither should a fully blown scene, because, you know, that scene in the grander context of the story might be leading to somewhere, might be leading to a conversation or something. But oftentimes I find people who are just like, after that one scene, like, I'm not even going to continue. I don't care. Like, the end, goodbye, forever. And it just blows my mind, because a lot of people want diversity in books and they want great rep. But then at the same time, if someone is tackling a topic and they don't like the way that they're tackling it, but in the grand scheme of things, it could be done really, really well, they're just not going there. It's like they want it done their way, and if it's not done in this way, then it's wrong. And I find that so frustrating, because books are meant to educate. They're meant to give us something. They give value, whether they're good or bad. They bring something to the forefront, and we should not attack the author for, you know, one tiny little mistake that they made and swear off reading a book by them ever again. Obviously, you can see I have a lot of kind of feelings on this topic. Sometimes I'm a little guilty of it too. Like, I will love an entire book and then I'll get to the end, and the way that everything gets wrapped up or something really bothers me or really irritates me. But I don't take that rating down like 500 notches because of that one thing. If you get what I'm saying. This isn't meant to attack anyone. It's meant to bring this kind of stuff to the forefront of your mind, because I don't know how many people are actually fully aware of how your comments can be perceived on the outside. I mean, I might not be part of every community. Like, I'm part of certain marginalized communities, and I take issue with how certain things are portrayed in books too. But and maybe it's because I cannot actually TNF, but like, I will sit through the entire book, whether I'm liking it or not, just to see if it will get better and to see if that thing gets explained later. But, you know, I just often see people who just get so highly offended and so angry about a scene or a phrase that gets used, and they're just done. Before, the authors don't necessarily think about it. And while I know several of them probably do have sensitivity readers, and some manage to do a really great job at writing it and being careful with it, we shouldn't hold them to such a high standard that they censor and cater to everyone's little tiny whims of how sensitive someone may or may not be, because that's once again a spectrum. One person who falls into a specific category and doesn't like it might be okay with it, whereas someone else might not be. And it's just kind of, in some way, in some weird roundabout way, it's a form of censorship. But we should turn that around and turn it into like kind of our own thing. And instead of buying into the hype and being like, oh my God, I'm so excited about this because of all this representation, maybe we should sit back and kind of do a little bit of digging before we actually decide to jump in. And this kind of goes back to the discussion that I did back in, I think it was like February. And I'll post that video up above for you guys too if you want to check it out. But it kind of goes into like the fact where we should do our own research and find out more about it before we jump into something that could potentially not live up to our expectations and not live up to what we want it to be versus what it actually is. So just kind of tread more carefully and do a little extra digging before diving into something that you think will be something versus what it actually is. Because, as I said before, we can't always hold the author accountable for that. And if you're going to go in and then that tiny little thing will set you off, I don't know. I don't know if it's exactly worth it to get that excited about it. Am I making sense? I feel like we're being too hard on someone who is telling a story and that story is important to them. But then at the same time, it kind of also ties back into my discussion once again from February. I'm not entirely sure what I'm trying to say, except for, do we need to nitpick every little thing that we read, or can we read for enjoyment's sake? And can we be critical but in a respectful way? Or can we be critical and analytical and kind of use it as a discussion point instead of a I'm gonna rage about this point? I think there are ways to accomplish what we want to see in terms of representation and in terms of sensitivity and in terms of having more diverse books and things like that. But I don't think it's raging or ranting about it on social media platforms, because in some ways, a lot of people talk about how sometimes words and situations can really damage a person and can hurt them. And you feel attacked. But think about the other side of things too. How do you think the author feels when they're being constantly attacked over a tiny thing in a greater story that they're trying to tell? And people who choose not to get the full picture of it before they say something decide to just go off on them. And I think that we should see the larger picture and get all of the facts before we jump on their bones, if you get my meaning. So I guess the big takeaways from this discussion are, yes, we want diversity. Yes, we want good representation. Yes, people should be sensitive in some ways to certain communities. But we should also be respectful with that discussion that we're having with the authors and other readers. We shouldn't attack people on social media and rage about it, because that's just not healthy for either side. And also just get all the facts before you jump in and launch into a full-blown conversation about it. And that's my 2 cents. And I'd be curious to hear what some of you guys have to say about this topic. But other than that, that's about all I've got. So as always, you guys know the drill. I've got both my social media links down below in the description. I have a Twitter, which is @ASeaofTomes, which is the same as my handle here. And I've also got a Goodreads, which is also linked below, and you guys can go over there and check out what I've been reading and follow my progress and see my very superficial thoughts before I come scream at you about it over here. And I will catch you later with another video soon. Bye!